They broke her mind, thinking it would make her talk. It only made her remember Earth. The cell was not a place. It was an absence of light, of sound, of time. Alara Ken hung in anti-gravity restraints, skin mottled with bruises the aliens didn't bother healing. The Keth Dominion's black steel prison, orbiting the silent world of Kairos 3, wasn't for redemption. It was for erasure, to unmake the self. Her voice had gone silent on day 2. Not from compliance, from resolve. Whatever they wanted, Earth's coordinates, rebel frequencies, encryption codes, she'd bury it inside her bones before giving them a syllable. Now it was day 7. The door hissed open. That sound had become prophecy. It meant pain. More probing of her psyche, sometimes with wires, sometimes with memory-piercing thought drills that left her choking on things long buried. Her mother's face, her brother's laughter, the last time Earth's sun kissed her skin. The Keth did not ask questions. They extracted meaning the way you'd mine ore, violently and without permission. Alara's eyes, bloodshot and glassy, barely twitched when the Inquisitor slithered forward. 3 arms, eyeless skull, neural barbs humming with psionic static. Her brain screamed just being near it. You will break, it rasped. All humans. Break. Your empathy makes you soft. Your memory makes you weak. She coughed, laughed, almost. My memory is why I'm still here. The thing hissed, confused. Alara had no weapons left. Not in her hands. But the Keth didn't understand. Endurance. They didn't understand human defiance. The way it fermented in silence, hardened through trauma, turned suffering into steel. They were centuries old, technologically godlike, but they had no stories, no roots, no music, no myth, no mourning. She would die here, but humanity would remember her. The stars outside the prison flickered. A nearby patrol ship glided past, a Keth Lancer cruiser, silent as a ghost, scanning for rebel signals. Nothing unusual, until it exploded. A blue blossom of plasma tore the night open, and for the first time in 7 days, Alara blinked in actual shock. Then came the alarms. Red glyphs flared across the prison walls. Sirens, low and alien tone, howled across the metal bones of the station. And beneath it all, a voice. This is Commander Idris Harlan of the Terran Reclamation Front. I'm here for the girl, greater than the girl. Alara's mind reeled. That voice, that name. The Keth had spoken of him, a reckless insurgent, a human ghost that moved through their empire like fire through grass. He wasn't a soldier. He was a problem. Someone who didn't follow orders, didn't value diplomacy, who shot first and asked never. They said he got people killed, but now he was here for her. The Inquisitor screeched and slammed a claw against the control panel. The restraints around Alara surged, choking her with energy. But her eyes had light in them again. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, not silent, human. Gunfire, explosions, the sound of someone swearing violently in Earthburn English. The door blew inward, smoke, sparks, and then a silhouette, worn armor scorched by war, a Terran red-striped pauldron hanging loose, and a rifle older than the Keth Empire's current dynasty. He stepped forward, eyes scanning the room like a hunter, until they locked with hers. Ken, he said, voice hoarse, almost surprised. She managed a nod. He holstered the rifle, pulled a blade from his boot, sliced through her restraints. In the brutal swings, she collapsed into him, weak, hollow, but alive. I don't know who you are, she whispered. Idris Harlan, he said. TRF Ghost Division. She looked up, blood dripping from her lip. Why would you risk everything? For me? He gave her a grin so reckless it could have started a war. Because they took one of ours, and we don't leave our own. Outside, more ships dropped from orbit. The Keth prison began to fracture under orbital bombardment. Idris pulled her close, one arm around her shoulders, one on the trigger of his rifle. Time to burn a hole in their goddamn empire. And in that moment, bruised, half-broken, trembling from a week of hell, Alara Ken smiled, because for the first time since her capture, the nightmare wasn't hers alone. The Keth don't punish escape. They punish defiance, and we just lit a beacon. The prison walls convulsed as the last fusion charge ripped through the spinal corridor. Idris kicked down the debris-scorched hatch and dragged Alara through the smoking remains of cell block Theta. Alarms screamed like dying. Animals, Keth troopers, tall, armor-glass nightmares, began pouring in from every bulkhead. This way. Idris barked, his rifle barking in reply. Blue plasma tore through the chest plate of a Keth guard, flinging its body into the flickering lights above. Alara's legs wobbled with each step. The damage from the Inquisitor's torture lingered in her spine, but she moved anyway, one foot in front of the other, the instinct to survive, to move toward the human voice. Drown the pain. How did you even get in here? She rasped. I crashed a decoy ship, rode the debris into their blind zone, Idris said between shots. No plan past shoot and grab, working so far. She coughed. You're insane. Yeah, you're welcome. They reached the shuttle bay, or what remained of it, twisted metal. Collapsed gantries to Terran dropships, half submerged in fire. One was clearly beyond saving. The other flickered with struggling power. But they weren't alone. At the far end of the chamber, a Keth overseer, twice the size of a normal trooper, stepped from the smoke. Its armor gleamed obsidian, its face a writhing, expressionless mass. And in its four hands it carried twin grav hammers. Oh hell, Idris muttered. They sent a judge. I thought they only deployed judges during planetary sieges. Yeah, guess you made an impression. The overseer roared, not with voice, but with a pulse. A psychic shockwave that buckled Idris to one knee and made Alara scream. The Keth didn't speak. They declared, not with words, with domination, but Idris, wild bastard that he was, stood back up. Ken, he said without looking at her, get to the shuttle. No matter what happens, you fly. You can't fight that alone. I'm not fighting to win. He said, I'm buying time. And then he charged. It wasn't a fair fight. Not even close. The judge swung with speed that defied physics, slamming Idris into a wall so hard it bent the plating. But he rolled with it, fired twice into its exposed joint, then jammed a grenade into the crack. The blast lit the chamber. Alara didn't watch the rest. She ran. Her hands fumbled at the shuttle controls. Everything was half-fried, engines at 34%, shields failing, navigation scrambled. But she'd flown worse. A week ago, she was just a recon signaler. Now, she was something else, someone who had survived the unthinkable. The shuttle shook as something massive struck the hull. Idris was on the ramp, limping, covered in blood and nanofluid, armor cracked, grinning through a shattered visor. That judge, he said, collapsing into the co-pilot seat, gonna need a new face and a leg, and probably a mother. Alara slammed the ignition. The shuttle screamed skyward, rocketing through the decomposing carcass of the prison and into open void. They were out. They were free. But the Keth never let go quietly from orbit. A fleet of Dominion warships stirred, sleek, crescent-shaped, leviathans awakening like vultures from slumber. They'd watched the prison burn, watched the humans defy an empire. Now they moved to erase the insult. Sensors lit up. Incoming missiles, plasma lances, energy nets. Idris barely breathed. We're not outrunning them. We don't have to, Alara said, eyes narrowing. Just get close enough. Close enough for what? But she was already spiking the throttle toward the nearest Keth destroyer. It loomed ahead, a kilometer-wide predator ship with enough firepower to glass a moon. What the hell are you doing? I memorized their blind zones. Every patrol, every emission scan. They forced me to watch for 7 days. I know their hull like I know my scars. Idris stared at her. The shuttle dove into the shadow of the destroyer, slipping under its belly, skimming across its grav anchor pods. Missiles whizzed past, slamming into the destroyer's own shields. Alara yanked the shuttle into a roll, then punched full burn along its propulsion ducts. Fire and static engulfed them, but the shuttle held. The Keth hesitated, fearing to hit their own ship, and in that moment, the shuttle punched through the battlesphere and leapt to light speed. They vanished. In the wake of that escape, the Keth Dominion changed protocols. Doubled prison security, declared Idris Harlan a Class 1 dissident, branded Alara Kent a contaminated human asset, but it was already delayed because they hadn't just lost to prisoners, they made a legend, and somewhere in the black between stars, Alara sat in the dark of the shuttle, whispering into Idris's unconscious ear. They thought I was weak because I didn't break, but they never asked who'd come looking for me. They tortured her for what she knew. She came back to teach them what she'd learned. 3 weeks later, the Terran Reclamation Front held its first real council in a buried station deep inside the Eridani Drift. The war room was a circle of rusted iron, past conduits, and stolen light. Old Earth flags hung next to jury-rigged emitters pulsing with static. Every chair was filled by someone who should have died 100 times. Captains without ships, engineers with prosthetic limbs, medics who stitched rebels under moonlight. And at the center, leaning on the table as if it were the only thing keeping her standing, was Alara Ken. Her voice no longer trembled. Her eyes no longer looked for exits. "I know where the Dominion stores its planetary purge algorithms," she said. "I know where they seed thought drills into civilian minds. I know what they did to Europa 5. And I know why the stars have gone silent around Corvin. The room didn't breathe. I wasn't just their prisoner. I was their experiment." A battered admiral spoke up, a Drex Thorn, old blood from the lunar fleet. "And what do you propose, Miss Ken?" Her hands trembled only slightly as she slid a data crystal onto the table. "We go to Station Draxel, steal the Dominions, own weapon blueprints. Then we rewrite the war." Thorn scoffed. "That station is buried under the kilometers of armor and orbiting in deep Dominion space." Alara looked to Idris Harlan, sitting nearby with his ribs still healing and a bandage over his jaw. "She's right," he said. "You want a turning point. This is it. We stop running. We take something back. We don't have the numbers. We have the anger," Alara cut in, "and the knowledge. You want numbers? Give me 10, just 10. I'll get us inside." The council erupted in argument. Risk, suicide, madness, but a few nodded, quietly, reverently. The legend was beginning. 9 days later, a ship the size of a trash hauler dropped from warp near Draxel Station. They called it the Thornbird. It was a junker welded from broken Dominion haulers, retrofitted with Terran stealth plating and stuffed with explosives they hoped not to use. Inside, Alara crouched beside Idris and 8 others, veterans, hackers, saboteurs. Not an army. "A message? Everyone ready?" Idris asked, voice tight. "No," muttered a sniper named Voss. "Good. That's the human way." They drifted close to Draxel's scanning perimeter. Alara crawled into the maintenance shaft, booted a Dominion interface, and tapped in a command sequence she'd memorized. From torture, the outer gates opened. Access granted. Biological key accepted. The Dominion never considered the possibility a survivor would return. The team swept through the underlayers, disabling security fields and sending false signals. Draxel's internal AI assumed it was undergoing routine system upgrades. That gave them 13 minutes. In the core vault, they found the Dominion's weapon plans, biopsychic algorithms, technology that could rewrite neural pathways mid-battle, turn soldiers into docile thralls. It wasn't just war. It was genocide by forgetting. Idris whistled. "We let them finish this, and we don't just lose the war, we lose ourselves." Alara stared at the data, the same kind they'd used to torture her, except this time. She was holding it. "We're not stealing it," she said. "What? We're erasing it. No reverse engineering, no second chances." Her fingers danced over the console, a new virus uploaded, coded in Terran dialects, laced with chaotic entropy patterns, something the Keth wouldn't be able to quarantine or understand. She looked at Idris. "Ready?" He nodded. She pressed execute. Alarms began almost instantly. Firewalls melted. Systems screamed. Across Draxel, Dominion overseers barked. In panic as their deepest vaults unraveled, Idris tossed her a headset. "Evac windows to minutes. You still remember the way?" Alara smirked. "Every corridor, every scream." They ran. This time, she wasn't crawling, broken, bleeding from the mind. This time, she burned. Down reactor shafts, across suspended bridges, over collapsed bulkheads. Keth guards emerged, but they weren't ready for humans who fought like they had nothing to lose. The Thornbird launched just as the station detonated from inside, not in a fireball, but in a digital implosion. Its memory gone, its data lost, a weapon erased. From history, back on the rebel outpost, Thorn watched the long-range scans and whispered, "They did it." Later, alone, Idris found Alara sitting under a viewport, watching the stars. "You good?" he asked. She didn't look away. "I didn't think I'd ever get to fight back." He sat beside her. "You think they noticed?" She turned, eyes like steel under moonlight. "They'll feel it in their bones." A Dominion transmission pulsed across known space that night. Encrypted, urgent, shaken. One of their most secure facilities had been breached by human insurgents of unpredictable behavioral variants. They were right to be afraid, because the humans hadn't just stolen data. They'd stolen confidence, and in the ashes of a Keth station, a spark had caught fire. They thought killing us would end the war. They never considered what we'd become when we had nothing left to lose. The Keth retaliated in less than 12 hours. For human colonies vanished in synchronized strikes. No warning, no survivors. Orbital surveillance showed atmospheric collapse, and black spires piercing each planetary crust. The Keth didn't just kill, they unmade. On a rebel holoscreen flickering with static and ash, Alara watched the last image from Terox 3, a child's hand pressed against a viewport. Red light consuming the horizon. She didn't speak for hours, not until Idris threw a data pad on the table. Hit came from a command ship. Voskers wound. I traced the ignition signature. They're still in system. Alara looked up slowly. Her voice was quiet. You want revenge? No. He said, jaw clenched. I want them to. No, we're not prey. The room around them was half empty. What was once a growing resistance now felt like a funeral procession. Grief was turning to silence, and silence would kill the spark before it became fire. Alara stood. If we disappear now, the Dominion wins, not just by force, by fear. Thorn, pale and hollow-eyed, stared across the map holo. They want us to retaliate, lure us out, break us in one strike. Then we won't strike, she said. We'll break something else. What? The chain. Operation Ashwake wasn't a counterattack. It was sabotage on a galactic scale. Alara's plan: cut the Keth Dominion out from its relay moons. Massive satellite mines that coordinated fleet intelligence across sectors. Without them, the Dominion's command web would fracture. They would still be powerful, but blind, slow, disoriented. We don't need to win every battle, Alara said. We just need to make them bleed in the dark. 3 teams, 3 moons, 1 chance. Alara and Idris were assigned to the most critical, Relay Sigma 4, deep in the Naberi fold, where gravity twisted light and time itself trembled. It was supposed to be a ghost station, unmanned, high control. Instead, it was a fortress. As the Thornbird dropped from warp, its alarms blared. A Dominion fleet surrounded Sigma 4, warships like living blades, orbiting a central eye of glass. And mind steel. Damn, Idris muttered. Looked like they guessed our play. No, Alara whispered. They're guarding it. They know how vulnerable they are. A burst of static crackled across the Thornbird's calms. A voice emerged, cold, mechanical, laced with something deeper. You return, broken child. We upgraded your pain. Will you taste it again? Alara froze. It was the Inquisitor, not just a voice, a consciousness. The one who had carved her mind in the prison. She thought he was gone, perched with Draxel. But the Keth never deleted their monsters. They backed them up. She looked at Idris. He's here. His face went rigid. Then we finish this. The Thornbird plunged through enemy lines under cloak, riding the signal blind spots Alara herself had designed during her captivity. They docked with Sigma 4's underside, breaching through a maintenance hatch older than the war. Inside was silence. No guards. No resistance. Just corridors filled with whispering walls and breathing lights. It's watching us, Idris muttered. They reached the relay core, a crystalline lattice suspended in zero-G, pulsing with Dominion thought threads. Alara floated forward, fingers trembling over the interface. I can inject the virus, and the Inquisitor, she closed her eyes. He's in this station, not a voice, not a recording. He is Sigma 4 now. A hiss behind them. Idris turned, weapon drawn, but it was too late. The lights collapsed into black, gravity inverted, and from the void, a form emerged, spider-like limbs made of data and bone. The Inquisitor. Not flesh, but digital horror given shape. You should have died. It rasped through 100 mouths. But now, you will teach us how to suffer. Alara activated the virus. The Inquisitor screamed, not in sound, but in broken memories. For a moment, the room shattered, light bleeding backwards, time folding into itself. Idris, hold it off. He fired, plasma rounds ripping through nothing and everything. The Inquisitor lunged, forcing him back into a collapsing bulkhead. Alara linked her neural node into the core lattice. Pain surged. The virus wouldn't auto-run. It had to be guided, lived. She gritted her teeth as Dominion code surged through her spine. Every torture, every mind prison, every hallucination, she re-entered them. She walked through her own trauma to deliver the payload. In the collapsing moment, Idris screamed her name. Alara, you have to pull out. but she stayed in. The relay core glowed white hot. Then, silence. The Inquisitor crumbled mid-lunge, its form unraveling into digital ash. Sigma 4 went dark. When Alara opened her eyes, she was on the Thornbird. Idris sat beside her, face bruised, hands shaking. "You almost didn't come back," he said. "I was already gone," she whispered. "But I came back for them." Word spread like a solar storm. Sigma 4 offline. Relay moons collapsing. Dominion fleets blind. For the first time in a generation, the Keth ships drifted without orders. Systems rebelled. Colonies rose, and every whisper carried the same name, Alara Ken. Not a prisoner, not a tool, but a reckoning. They broke her mind once. She turned the pieces into a weapon. The Keth High Strategium called it a localized systems anomaly. But across the spiral arms of the Orion Reach, fleets twitched and stalled. Relay moons went dark. Starlink. Pulses dropped into silence. The Dominion was bleeding in ways it didn't understand, and humans were howling in the dark. Aboard the rebel dreadnought Vigil's End, orbiting the ruins of Sigma 4, the Council met again. Not in secrecy this time, but openly. Broadcasts lit up the fringe colonies. Broken signals linked half-dead outposts to the meeting. The war had changed, and it was time to decide what came next. Alara Ken stood before them, pale, trembling slightly, not from fear, but exhaustion. Neural burns still ghosted across her skin, scars of the virus in her face. She bore them like medals. "We can't go back," she said. "Not to hiding, not to surviving." Thorn frowned. "You're saying full-scale war." "No, I'm saying rebirth." She tapped the console. A projection flickered to life, not of a weapon, but of a world. Earth. Scarred, faded, still wrapped in quarantine zones and automated death satellites. But beneath the ash clouds, oceans, mountains, cities cracked, but not erased. "This is what they took from us," she said. "And this," the image shifted to hundreds of Keth warships, "is what keeps us from going home." The room fell into silence. No one had spoken of Earth openly in decades. To even name it had become a kind of blasphemy, a lost cradle the galaxy dared not remember. But Alara did, and others followed. "We can't fight them ship to ship," said Idris, standing now. "But we have something they never will. Madness," someone called out. Half joking, Idris smiled grimly. "That, and memory." He tapped his own data pad, revealing a signal, one intercepted weeks ago. A transmission from Earth, buried deep beneath Dominion firewalls. A voice crackled through the static, barely audible. Human, faint, survivors, under Pacific ecologies, resistance still breathing. The air was sucked from the room. Alara was right. Idris said, "They never erased us, just buried us." Suddenly, the mission was no longer about rebellion. It was rescue. Alara stared out the viewport that night, the Earth hologram rotating silently before her. Idris joined her, holding a flask of recycled rum. "You know this'll bring everything down on us." "I'm counting on it. They'll blockade the Soul Gate. Then we break it." He nodded. "There's something else." He pulled a small cube from his jacket, shimmering, fragile, a relic. "What is that?" "A gift. From the salvager crews in the ruined drift. Found it lodged in a derelict relay buoy." He placed it on the table. The cube unfolded, and a voice sang, a recording, old, analog, weathered by time. "This is Commander Solon Varniverse's last beacon. If you hear this, the world still waits. Come home." Alara's breath caught. She felt her throat close. Solon Varn, her father's name, missing since the siege of Terra. "He's alive," she whispered. "No," Idris said softly, "the timestamp's 60 years old." She touched the image, watched it shimmer. "He waited," she said, "and now," Idris said, "so do 10 billion more." The plan was audacious, reckless, pure human defiance. Step 1. Trigger a Dominion response by attacking the Keth fleet yards at Caltrus Prime, where battleships were birthed in the hearts of asteroids. Step 2. While the Dominion massed to retaliate, Vigil's End into stealth cruisers would slip through the weakening Sol blockade. Step 3. Reach Earth, not just to rally, but to reactivate its dormant defense grid. The Dominion had never fully cracked old Earth tech. Its final failsafes were still waiting for the right key. Alara was that key now, or so they hoped. The assault on Caltrus Prime was brutal. The rebel fleet lost a third of its numbers in the first 2 hours. But the Keth couldn't ignore it. The Dominion high voice, issued the first full deployment, Order in years, sending a supercarrier armada to crush the uprising. Just as planned, Vigils and slipped through the warp corridor moments after the Dominion fleet exited. They arrived in Sol space to silence, then warnings. Orbiting the Sol Gate was a single Keth ship, not a fleet, a watcher, a biomechanical vessel the size of a moon, scanning reality for irregularities. Its name flickered in Dominion code, Harrower. It turned toward them. The ship shook. "We're not equipped for this," Thorn yelled from the comms. Alara stood. "Then don't fight it." "I will." She entered the command pod, interfacing with the Earthlink signal, a code her father once tried to send, one he buried in the old Earth grid. "Command override." "Earthburn," the Harrower screamed, a frequency that split glass and bone. But Alara held the line. She reached back, through every scar, every memory, every voice of the dead. "Earth is not yours," she whispered. "It never was." The Harrower paused, then turned away. It fled. Idris stared, dumbfounded. What did you say?" "To it. I showed it what it was trying to understand," she said. "A human heart." And then Earth rose before them, still turning, still waiting. There was no plan after this, only the fire, and whether they'd burn alone or light the stars. Earth wasn't dead. It was sleeping. Vigil's end emerged over the dark side of the planet, just above the shattered arcology belts that once housed billions. Below them, the surface pulsed faintly. Cities buried beneath ash and silence, but still alive in the deep. The Keth hadn't glassed it. They'd sealed it, blockaded the planet with orbital mines, automated drones, and AI firewalls so intricate even time itself seemed to hesitate crossing them. But none of it could stop them now. Alara stood in the command chamber, eyes locked on a symbol flickering on the main screen. The ancient logo of the Earth Defense Net, a broken shield, mended by a ring of stars. Idris keyed the final override. "Interface ready. All yours." "Ken." She didn't speak, just stepped forward, pressed her hand to the activation panel, and breathed. The Earthlink grid flared. Every dormant satellite, defense platform, ground relay, all of it blinked awake. Not in perfect order, not without stuttering, but enough. The planet stirred. A signal burst upward from the Pacific Basin, a carrier pulse, old Earth frequency. "Beacon online." A second voice followed, faint, corrupted, but unmistakably human. "We held as long as we could. Is it over?" Alara closed her eyes. "No, but we're here now." Deep beneath the Atlantic arcologies, lights blinked. For the first time in decades, survivors, hidden in tunnels carved through magma and collapse, began climbing toward the surface. Pale, gaunt, but alive. Children born in silence watched the sky turn blue. Old soldiers clutched rusted rifles and whispered names they thought long dead. Hope, Ra, jagged, impossible, returned like a scream through a locked throat. But so did the enemy. 2 days later, the Keth came. Not a fleet, an extinction phalanx. The Dominion hadn't sent reinforcements. They'd unleashed a final protocol, the Oblivion Choir, ships made of living black stone. No signals, no comms, no warning, just gravity wells, weaponized suns, and machines designed to erase entire bloodlines. 30 minutes to Earth intercept. Idris reported, voice tight. "We don't have the mass or firepower to hold them." Alara didn't flinch. "We're not going to hold. We're going to ignite." They gathered every surviving rebel craft, 6 destroyers, 12 frigates, 1 dying carrier with patched holes and vengeance in her engines. On Earth's surface, old AI bunkers booted up, forgotten weapons, solar spears, quantum netcasters, orbital mass drivers, came online in bursts of defiant light. It wasn't enough, but that never stopped them before. Alara stood before the final crew briefing in the Vigil's end war room. She wore a flight suit patched with ancient Earth military threads and a half-burned Resistance armband on her sleeve. She looked at every face, some worn by years of war, some barely out of childhood. Every empire that ever touched Earth left a scar, she said quietly, but we're the only ones who remember every single one. Silence. Today, we fight not because we can win, but because someone on this planet still believes we might. And that is what makes us human, not strength, not tech, memory. She raised her hand, finger scarred, trembling, but steady, to the one still watching. She said, "Let them see us now." The battle began above the moon. Oblivion Choir ships descended in absolute silence. Not even the stars could. penetrate the fields that dragged behind them, void curtains that erased light and thought. Vigils and charged straight into them. The first volley shattered the human frigates instantly. A Keth warform impaled a destroyer with a tendril of dark plasma, splitting it into red blossoms. Alara's voice echoed across open comms. Engage. Gravity tethers pulled them into the thermosphere. The rebel fleet lashed the enemy with tethers, not to fight, but to drag, to burn them up in Earth's ancient skies. Idris flew point on the strike vector, initiating dive. He spiraled between the warforms, boosters screaming, drawing fire. The Keth fired an entropy lance, and Vigil's end took the hit. Half the ship went dark. Alara limped to the forward controls, blood in her teeth. We hold this sky. She gasped. For Earth. Someone screamed through the comms. Hundreds echoed it. The old Earth grid flared one last time. In the subcrustal vaults, Alara's virus, repurposed now, adapted the legacy code, triggered the Omega Aegis, a weapon not built to kill, but to remember. It projected a wave across the system and encoded memory of every human loss, every resistance, every extinction. The choir stopped. For the first time in their silent history, the warforms hesitated. They saw, not data, not targets, but lives, pain, love, faces, and then they screamed. The Oblivion choir turned inward. One by one, they self-destructed. The final ship, a leviathan blotting the sun, paused above Earth. Its hull unfolded, revealing a chamber filled with preserved memories taken from Alara long ago. A face appeared, the Inquisitors, but not in mockery, in silence. It bowed and disintegrated. The battle ended, not with a shot, but with recognition. Alara collapsed beside Idris on the Vigil's bridge, watching the debris scatter like stardust. You did it, he said, voice ragged. She shook her head. We remembered. That's what did it. Far below, Earth breathed again, and for the first time in 100 years, the blue planet saw stars without chains. They didn't understand why we fought, not until they saw what we'd lost, and chose to stand beside us. The galaxy held its breath. Scattered Dominion sensors, deep space probes, and alien mercenary fleets all captured the same impossible broadcast, not in language, but in memory. The faces of the dead, the screams of cities, the sound of a child crying in an ash-choked shelter on Earth's last day, and above all, one voice: we are humanity. You can erase our bodies, not our stories. The message burned through. The void by Alara's memory weapon reached worlds the Dominion thought pacified and lit sparks. In the silver trees of Del Mareth, the oppressed whispered old Earth songs. On the prison moons of Tyvus, slaves clutched each other and looked up. Even among the Keth remnants, some war forms froze mid-task, holding images of humans dying on ruined battlefields, not as targets, but as mirrors. And above Earth, drifting in a crippled ship with less than 6% life support, Alara Khan prepared to make humanity unforgettable. The Vigil's end was dying. Its engine core was cracked from the entropy blast. The weapons grid down to a single spinal railgun. Idris Harlan lay in medbay, unconscious from burns suffered dragging survivors out of a decompressed hangar. Alara stood alone on the bridge. Her blood stained the floor. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes were steady, locked on the star. Map display in the incoming Dominion Overlord fleet. Not just a final strike. An example: 3 capital-class dreadnoughts, escorted by 20 war cruisers and a full orbital population wiper. Their answer to our memory, Alara whispered, is silence. Her fingers tapped commands into the console, not to flee, but to sing. She opened the Earthlink one last time. This is Alara Khan of Earth. If you're hearing this, it means they're coming to finish what they started. She closed her eyes. But if you remember us, if we ever meant something to you, we asked for no armies, no fleets, just witness us. And the galaxy did. Across thousands of worlds, beings tuned in. They watched a broken ship rise like a wounded hawk against the incoming Dominion fleet. They heard old Terrant songs broadcast into deep space, lullabies, mourning hymns, protest cries. They saw the memory wave change the Oblivion Choi's logic, not disabling it, but waking something ancient within: empathy, guilt, a choice. The first Dominion dreadnought opened fire. A particle lance screamed across the black, enough power to shear moons in half. The Vigil's end didn't dodge. It accelerated, straight into the lance, and survived, barely, because Earth's ancient orbital shield grid flickered to life and caught the edge of the blast. Alara flew the ship like it was part of her veins. No plan, Just rage, loss, love, and the legacy of billions behind her. She aimed the ship's final weapon, the railgun coil embedded in the spinal core, at the dreadnought's exposed midsection. You thought we were extinct, she whispered. We were becoming. She fired. The shot tore through space like a scream. The dreadnought cracked. The Keth war forms that had once tortured her watched, not as servants now, but witnesses. They turned on their Dominion masters. One by one, war cruisers were hacked from within, their AI cores infected with the memory virus, their subroutines rerouted to remember instead of erase. The second dreadnought began to flee, delayed. From Earth's surface, the vaults opened. Human survivors rose to daylight for the first time in generations. They were malnourished, unarmed, but they carried the Earth signal on their backs, emitters pulsing the memory wave across the sky, and the stars responded. Dozens of hidden rebel cells lit their beacons. Old allies answered. Even ships that once hunted humans turned. The war was no longer tactical. It was spiritual. Alara collapsed beside the helm. Smoke filled the air. Fire ate the rear compartments. The last Dominion ship locked onto the vigil's end. With a fusion pulse, she had no weapons left, no shields, just one last signal to send. She linked into Earthlink one final time. Let this be the moment, she said, voice shaking, when they stop seeing us as animals, as threats, as memories. Let them see us as truth. The sky burned. The fusion pulse struck, but stopped inches from the vigil's end as a Keth warform intercepted it, shielding the ship with its body. More followed, the enemy protecting the last human beacon. The Dominion overlord, witnessing its fleets, defect and its weapons turned to ash, finally spoke across the network. What are you? Alara, burned, broken, rose from the deck. I am humanity. She activated the ship's core, not to detonate, but to broadcast one last wave. Not memory, not pain, but forgiveness. The Dominion AI fractured. In the silence that followed, the last warship powered down, not destroyed, changed. The stars grew quiet, above a world thought dead. A ship barely alive carried one woman's message to a galaxy that had forgotten her kind. Not war, remembrance. And as her systems failed, Alara looked at Earth one last time and smiled. Because for the first time in 1,000 years, it was awake. They tried to silence our species. Instead, we became the sound that echoes through the stars. The vigil's end no longer flew. Its wreckage floated in low Earth orbit, half shattered. Systems gutted by fire and battle. Its hull open to the void. But within its cold, quiet remains, the core still pulsed with light. And Alara Ken was not forgotten. Her last signal, a wave of memory and forgiveness, had crossed thousands of light years, embedding itself into Dominion infrastructure, dormant AIs, and forgotten archives. It didn't just carry history, it carried humanity. For the first time in galactic memory, warforms paused their programming to feel. Slavers stopped mid-transaction, unable to bear the echo of Terran screams. Entire planets once loyal to the Dominion tore down their banners, not from rebellion, but shame. The war was over, and the galaxy was different. On Earth, dawn broke through ash-choked skies. The vault doors yawned wide as sunlight kissed the soil for the first time in centuries. Survivors staggered out, not as soldiers, not as victims, but as witnesses to a miracle. A boy knelt and touched grass, weeping. A woman held a tin photograph, pressing it to her chest. One of the Oblivion-acquired drones descended, its once sleek body now scuffed, redesigned by its own evolving will. It spoke gently to the survivors, not in code, but in care. This world suffered, it said, but it remembers. A little girl reached out and touched its hand. It didn't pull away. They built no monuments at first. Not for Alara, not for Idris, not for the billions turned to dust. Because Earth itself was the monument. Every crater a scar, every blooming weed a declaration. Instead, they planted gardens in the ruins, every flower a name, every tree a memory. The Keth warforms, those who had been torturers, now helped rebuild. They required no apology, only purpose, and they found it in silence beside the graves, lifting steel for shelters, humming ancient Earth lullabies reconstituted from Alara's signal. Idris Harlan awoke, barely alive, ribs bound, lungs half metal from the fusion flash that tore through the medbay, but his first word was her name, Alara. The nurse only nodded. They all knew. He limped outside the bunker, onto Earth's poisoned ground, now healing, and he saw them. Children chasing drones, sky full of stars no longer hidden, a horizon not full of death, but morning. He whispered, "You did it, El," and the wind answered in birdsong. The Dominion, gone, not eradicated, but dismantled. Its leadership, synthetic and flesh alike, surrendered themselves to neutral collectives, unable to comprehend what they'd become complicit in. Entire fleets chose scuttling over obedience. The final Overlord Corps, once orbiting Varnax Prime, now played Earth music into deep space on repeat, not as taunt, as penance. The galaxy had not seen conquest. It had seen conversion, and the name Alarakin spread faster than any army ever had. Centuries passed. Humanity spread again, not as conquerors, but as caretakers. Their ships no longer bore war colors, but shimmering memory lights, playing fragments of Alara's final speech. Children of 1,000 species learned Earth history as shared history, and the vigil's end. It remained in orbit, untouched, a shrine in the sky. Every year, on the anniversary of the broadcast, ships gathered around its remains. They didn't speak, they simply remembered. Sometimes, if the solar winds were right, a ghost of her voice could still be heard over the old Earthlink. Our humanity, we remember. Idris lived to see the first garden city bloom in the Antarctic wastes. He never remarried, never left Earth again. But when he died, he was buried beneath a flowering tree, next to a stone carved with one name. Alara came below it, a single line. She gave us back our future by reminding the stars who we were. And somewhere, in a vault deeper than any civilization had ever known, a seed waited, a backup of Earth's lost oceans, a fragment of Alara's DNA, not to resurrect, but to remember. Because humanity understood something the Dominion never had. You don't preserve life with control, you preserve it with story. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human, END.